With my beloved husband, we welcomed our adorable child into the world. But my mother-in-law, as I will refer to her, had the nerve to say our child was not cute. Can you imagine saying such a thing about your own grandchild? To make matters worse, she treated me like an unwanted intruder. Well, two can play at that game. This is a tale about a self-centered, horrendous mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law who fights back. My name is Viola. I married my husband Elwood when I was 28. We were blessed with our long-awaited son, Ricky, just a year ago. I went back to work when Ricky was half a year old, placing him in a daycare center while I focused on my job. Some might frown upon that, leaving a baby that young in daycare, but there was a reason behind it. My husband's company wasn't doing so well, and his salary had gradually decreased since we got married. In fact, I'm now earning twice as much as he is. With a newborn child, expenses were only going to increase. With that in mind, I decided to return to work sooner rather than later. I've never disliked my job, so returning wasn't a problem for me. However, there was one person who wasn't pleased with my decision. That person was my husband's mother, my mother-in-law. She had moved in with us 3 months prior. She didn't seem to like me much, not only criticizing my parenting, but also complaining about my day-to-day activities. How could you leave such a small child in a daycare center? You're unfit to be a mother. It's always been the norm for a woman to stay home and protect the household, hasn't it? Good grief, what century are we in? She kept insisting on this outdated notion. The moment I came home from work with our son Ricky, she'd start, "You're working late again? Don't you feel sorry for Ricky?" I do spend all day with Ricky on my days off. He's settled in the childcare center, so it's okay. But when I tried to argue, she'd furrow her brows angrily. "Well, you're just taking the word of the childcare workers. If you keep this up, the kid won't grow up right." My mother-in-law, for short, who doesn't even take care of Ricky, would boss me around about parenting from her high horse. On top of that, she had no problem attacking my character. "I regret living with a daughter-in-law like you, who only thinks about work. I wonder why my son Elwood married such a woman. I'm going crazy from stress every day." This time, even I had had enough. If it's that bad, should we stop living together? You know why we decided to live together, right? There was a reason mother-in-law started living with us in our house. Originally, she lived in her husband's home. But one day, her husband had a traffic accident and became paralyzed from the waist down. In addition, it was discovered that he had dementia, and mother-in-law could no longer take care of him, so she put him in a care facility. She then insisted that we move in with her, but both my husband and I had work. Considering our commute, it was impossible for us to move from our current house. Then, one day, mother-in-law moved her stuff to our house without warning and just settled in. In the end, this living arrangement wasn't agreed upon. Mother-in-law just moved in on her own. It's what you might call an unwelcome cohabitation. Look, I understand that things are tough for you because of my father-in-law. That's why I agreed to this living arrangement. But remember, we promised not to interfere with each other, right? Huh? Did we? I can't remember something from so long ago. Even when I reminded her of our promise, mother-in-law was riding high, perhaps confident that she wouldn't be kicked out. Her attitude was really getting on my nerves. Enough is enough! I agreed to live with you because we promised not to interfere. This is not what we agreed on. Oh, you're so noisy. Why can't you be cuter? Like Cecil. She's such a good, obedient girl. Cecil is my brother-in-law's wife. From my perspective, she's my sister-in-law, and she also has a bad personality. It's better to say that she's cunning, rather than having a bad personality. As soon as she married my brother-in-law, she became a housewife, and was very liked by my mother-in-law. Mother-in-law would invite her to our house without our permission, and they'd talk behind my back. Listen to this, Cecil. Viola is still working, you know. Oh my, really? Ricky is still so small. Can't believe she can do that. Right? Right? Unlike you, who is smart enough to become a full-time housewife after getting married. I don't have to worry about when you have a child. I respect you, mother-in-law, so I'll do my best. Such petty squabbles would go on and on. To my displeasure, they would intentionally converse in loud voices within my earshot. I despised them from the bottom of my heart. Gradually, to curry favor with my mother-in-law, Cecil began to speak ill of me of her own accord. You know, doesn't my brother-in-law make about the same salary as my husband? Yet, you're still working too. Could it be that you're terrible at managing money? Perhaps a few years ago, my husband did earn the same as my brother-in-law, but now his earnings have dipped below that. I hadn't mentioned to them about my husband's company's deteriorating financial situation, partly due to my pride. It's become routine now that whenever Cecil talks trash about me, my mother-in-law joins in, gleefully. Right? It's shocking to think she blames others for her poor financial management and childcare responsibilities. Cecil, you must never become a wife like her, okay? Of course not. I respect you so much, ma'am. Oh, Cecil, you're such a sweetheart. I cringe at their exchange of superficial compliments. I wish they'd take it somewhere else. It's just adding to my stress. I felt the limit of living with my mother-in-law and decided to talk to my husband about it. It's about your mother. She keeps inviting Cecil over every day to belittle me. Huh? Mom does? Since I usually come home earlier than him, my husband had no idea about the harassment. Predictably, he looked puzzled. Yes, she does. She promised not to interfere, but she's been complaining about me continuing to work. Cecil joins in, and they go on and on insulting me. I can't take it anymore. My husband thought for a while, and then said something outrageous. Whoa, but Cecil seems to get along well with Mom, right? Maybe you should try to meet Mom halfway too, Viola. What? Were you even listening to me? She's denying my entire being, you know? How am I supposed to get closer to someone like that? As I pressed him, my husband scratched his head in annoyance. Don't get so worked up. Just try to emulate Cecil for now. I'm sure Mom will warm up to you too. What does that even mean? You want me to flatter her like Cecil does? I've had enough. I was a fool to ask for your help. I felt utterly alone. Frustration welled up in me before the anger did. The snide remarks from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law continued as usual the next day. As I began preparing dinner after coming home, I heard this. Are you planning to make another half-hearted dinner today? I'm tired of your lazy cooking. That's because she insists on working, you know. If it were up to me or my mother-in-law, we would never serve our husbands such low-quality meals, right? For the record, my mother-in-law's cooking is nothing to brag about. It's overly seasoned and not that delicious. As for my sister-in-law, her homemaking skills are quite evident given that she practically lives at our place. While cursing them inwardly, I silently proceeded with my dinner preparations. When my husband came home, both my mother-in-law and Cecil changed their attitudes drastically and stopped picking on me. Because of this, my husband couldn't trust what I said. Just when things were like this, an incident happened. Out of nowhere, I got a call from the childcare center during my work shift. I hurriedly contacted my husband and rushed home. There, my mother-in-law and my teary-eyed son were waiting. What on earth do you think you're doing, mother-in-law? How could you just take Ricky away from the childcare center without my consent? When I shouted in anger, my mother-in-law sighed as if she was tired of it all. She looked at me with condescending eyes. What's all the fuss? I did it for my grandson. Paying for a childcare center is a waste of money. Raising a child is a mother's job, isn't it? But that's just your opinion, right? We have reasons to send Ricky to the childcare center. It's inexcusable for you to just take him without permission. It's no different from kidnapping. Kidnapping? Are you kidding me? Even though he's my grandson? It doesn't matter that he's your grandson. You disregarded the teacher's warnings and just took him. That's kidnapping. No matter how clearly I made my point, she simply shrugged it off. Then she said something unbelievable. What nonsense! To begin with, neither you nor your son are cute. If you have any complaints, just get out. She didn't think my son, her own grandson, was cute? At that moment, a huge red flag went up in my mind. To call her own grandson not cute in front of him? We can't live with this woman any longer. I'll never forgive her for insulting my precious son. I swore to myself to protect him, no matter what. At that moment, my husband arrived home. I immediately broke the news to him. Elwood! It was your mother who took Ricky from the childcare center. I've reached my limits. I can't live with her anymore. Suddenly, my mother-in-law played the victim and started pretending to cry. Listen, Elwood! Can you believe what Viola is saying? She's accusing me of kidnapping. I just want to pick up cute little Ricky. That's all. Isn't it horrible? Just picking him up? I got heated at her words. Stop joking around. You just said that my son is not cute. You told me to get out. This is our house, not yours. Are you just pretending to be a good mother in front of my husband? Elwood, please help me. Viola is always picking on me. Watching my mother-in-law cry out to my husband, I felt as if everything was ridiculous. If my husband were to side with this woman with her poor acting, at that point, I decided it would be just my son and me. We'd forge ahead together. The first to break the silence was my husband. First, I want to talk with Viola. Mom, please return to your room. My husband, who always sided with his mother, made her eyes widen in surprise with this statement. What are you saying? There's no need to listen to Viola, right? Can't you see I'm suffering? This involves Ricky too. That's why I want to have a proper conversation with Viola, as his parent. My mother-in-law looked unsatisfied the entire time, but probably didn't want to upset my husband, so reluctantly agreed. Afterward, my husband and I spent hours discussing the incident and everything leading up to it, eventually coming to a conclusion. A few days later, we decided to tell her the outline of what we discussed. Mom, sorry to keep you waiting. We finally come to a decision. My husband spoke to my mother-in-law with a smile. Seeing my expression, mother-in-law must have been convinced that her son was on her side. She started chattering excitedly. So, you're finally breaking free from Viola, huh? Without even considering what I had just said, mother-in-law was over the moon. She called my brother-in-law and his wife, and, like always, began bad-mouthing me. Wow, what a relief! Today, we finally get to say goodbye to Viola. Right, Viola? To her question, I responded with a smile. Course. Well then, hurry up and leave, and take that not-so-cute kid who looks just like you with you. This house is going to be for me, Elwood, Derek, and Cecil from now on. Bye! Then my husband, who had been silent up until that point, slowly spoke up. Let's go, Viola. Excuse me. Let's go, Elwood. What? What? Mother-in-law seemed to be struggling to understand, repeating what several times. My husband and I started packing our belongings, preparing to leave with our son. That's when mother-in-law stopped us. Wait, Elwood! What's going on? We're going to live in this house, together, right? What are you talking about? My husband turned to mother-in-law with a cold stare. I'm leaving with Viola. I can't put up with your delusions any longer. Mother-in-law trembled, then collapsed. Why? Why would you side with her? I heard everything from the childcare center teacher. How you kidnapped Ricky without permission, how you yelled at the childcare workers, how you slandered Viola at the center. Everything. That's... I never thought you could sink so low, Mom. Surrounded by people who only listen to you. You really messed up. Enjoy your life. With that, my husband said, "Let's go," and pushed me out of the house. Until the end, mother-in-law called out to him, crying. On the way to our new place, my husband apologized. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize sooner. I hope you can forgive me." "What are you talking about? You taking action now is more than enough." I smiled at my husband. Yes, the fact that he believed me over mother-in-law this time was the most comforting thing. Since then, we've cut off contact with mother-in-law and my brother-in-law's family and regained our peaceful daily life. After we canceled our lease on the house, mother-in-law, with nowhere else to go, apparently moved in with my brother-in-law and his wife. With the addition of mother-in-law and the pressure she put on their living expenses, my brother-in-law's income wasn't enough. As a result, Cecil had to get a job, and now mother-in-law is alone at home. There's no one for her to badmouth or to share in the bad-mouthing. Even with Cecil, who used to be her best buddy, they now argue constantly. "I have to work because of you, mother-in-law. Give me a break." "What? It's my fault? Get out of here, you old hag!" Hearing the real Cecil, her husband seems to have lost his feelings for her. I heard they're in the middle of a divorce. She used to have a lot of free time to act cute in front of my husband, but now that she's working and often irritable, her true colors have shown. No matter how dire their circumstances become, I have no intention of ever interacting with mother-in-law again. From now on, my husband, my son, and I will work together to build a happy home.
My ex-girlfriend once scorned me, a high school dropout, turned worker, and discarded me like a worn-out fool. She treated me like nothing more than a money tree, and I thought I'd never see her again. But after 11 years, we happened to bump into each other at my daughter's school event.
Sheesh, I guess your wife suits you well, given you're a dropout and all.
She dresses so shabby. Could you keep your child away from mine? I'm worried your stupidity might rub off on my daughter. She hurled insults not only at me, but at my wife and daughter as well. My husband is a CEO. Unlike you, he's always too busy. Can't compare to your low-income lifestyle, huh? My smug ex, however, turned deathly pale at her husband's shocking behavior. My name is Liam Peterson. Today, I'm moving back to my hometown from New York with my wife and daughter. Has it really been 11 years? This feels nostalgic. After a few hours from New York, we arrived at our new home. I hadn't been back to my hometown since I was 25, and seeing the unchanged townscape made me feel nostalgic.
Dad, this house is beautiful. Will I be living here starting today?
Yes, that's right. Do you like it?
Yeah, I'm so excited.
I remember you couldn't sleep because you were so excited last night. The child whose eyes sparkled in front of the new house was my daughter, Harper. Beside her, my wife looked at Harper with a gentle smile. My kind wife and my lively, cheerful daughter, Harper. For both of them, it's their first time living in a new city. But they are excited and helping with the moving process. I've decided to support these two with all my heart. A month quickly passed since the move, filled with busy days at work and in private life. Today is the first time we are attending a school event after Harper transferred schools. My wife and I worried about whether Harper was getting along at the new school. Decided to go together to check on her. The school is also my alma mater, and although it has been nicely renovated, some remnants of the old days remain, bringing back memories. Oh, aren't you Liam? At that moment, I heard a familiar voice from behind. Are you Riley, by any chance? Yes, it's been a while. Liam, who is this woman? My wife looked at her curiously. She's an old friend from back in town. She wasn't actually a person I could proudly introduce to my wife. I kind of beat around the bush. That's because she was my ex-girlfriend, whom I had dated for about 3 years since I was 21. At that time, I truly loved Riley, but it seemed it wasn't mutual. I lost my parents when I was young, dropped out of high school, and was struggling to survive with my brother. Despite everything, I had savings of $5 million, which was a bit more than my peers. Riley approached me, targeting this money, and constantly asked for branded goods and expensive items. I thought, if it's for Riley, and bought her whatever she wanted, even if it was a bit of a stretch. But naturally, after constantly buying her luxury goods, my savings eventually ran out. And the moment she realized I had no more money to give, Riley's attitude completely changed. I absolutely can't marry a dropout, you idiot. She mocked me and dumped me right then and there. Riley saw me as nothing more than a convenient money source. Seeing Riley for the first time in a long time, she was draped in branded clothes, and all the accessories she wore seemed to be expensive. Apparently, she was able to marry a high-spec man to her liking. Is your kid in this class too? Yes, her name is Avery. When did you return to this town? Just recently. I came back due to work. I see. So the new student Avery was telling me about is your daughter? Riley then frowned and glared at us. What is it? You're still dressing cheap as ever. From the looks of it, your income hasn't changed much, has it? Your wife seems to match your dropout style. What? I wanted to retaliate, but we were in Harper's classroom. I couldn't cause a scene. I swallowed my words and stayed calm. My wife, looking embarrassed, looked down at her inexpensive clothes. Afterwards, Harper's class observation started. But the entire time, I was awkward, with Riley sitting next to us. Though the parents had an uncomfortable relationship, the kids were different. Harper, who initially struggled to fit in after transferring, was slowly becoming friends with everyone, thanks to Avery, Riley's daughter, who was the class representative. We started hearing more about the school, and we were delighted to see Harper sharing her school stories with a smile.
Dad, I was playing with Avery and her friends today.
Haha, is that so? What were you guys playing?
Unicycle? Avery is really good at it. She's teaching me at the school playground until evening.
I hope Harper gets good at it soon. Did you come back with Avery and her friends after school?
No, Avery's mom came to pick her up, so she left before us.
I see. It would be nice if you could come back together tomorrow. According to Harper, Avery is good at both academics and sports, better than other kids. Harper admires Avery. Avery seems to be a straightforward kid, despite her mother. She must take after her father. That night, after hearing about Avery from Harper, while we were relaxing and watching TV after bath, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. Bewildered, I decided to answer it. Hello. Good evening. My daughter had your company today. Riley. Why suddenly? It seems you haven't changed your number since back in the days. Good thing I remembered it. Apparently, she had memorized my number even after changing hers. I see you have a good memory, but why are you calling me at this hour? I have a request. I want your daughter to stop playing with Avery. I couldn't believe what Riley just said. What are you talking about? I'm afraid your stupidity might rub off on my Avery from your daughter. I mean, your daughter can't be that bright either. Just because I was like that doesn't mean Harper would be the same. Stop talking nonsense. I couldn't hold back my anger and retorted when she insulted my daughter. Your daughter, right? She'll eventually turn out the same. I thought you were finally gone, but here you are again, a sore sight. Why did you come back? I returned due to work circumstances. That can't be helped, can it? Feeling pretty high and mighty for not doing any real work, aren't you? Too incompetent that you ended up this far flung, right? Apparently her prejudice against me hasn't changed since back in the day. Riley continued to hurl abuse at Harper and me, based on her groundless delusions. Unlike you, my husband is a CEO and makes $20 million a year. We're in a completely different league compared to your family. Please be aware of your standing, and don't let your foolish daughter get too close to Avery. Without waiting for my response, she ended the call abruptly. What happened, honey? It's nothing. Don't worry about it. Upon hearing my confrontational tone, my wife looked at me with concern. To spare her any unnecessary worry, I decided to keep the details of the call to myself. The next day, concerned about Harper after yesterday's call, I decided to pick her up from school after work. Looking across the schoolyard, amidst other kids playing cheerfully on the playground equipment, including Avery, I spotted Harper playing alone in a secluded area. Harper, I've come to pick you up. Let's go home together today.
Dad, did you finish work early today?
Yeah, but why are you playing alone over here?
Well, I just felt like playing alone today.
Harper answered awkwardly while twirling her hair. A habit she has when she's not being truthful. Did that woman tell Avery not to play with Harper? Ever since yesterday's call, negative thoughts have been racing through my mind. On our way home in the car, I casually asked Harper, "Hey Harper, how's school going? Having fun?"
Yeah, it's fun.
That's good to hear. Despite her words, Harper's reply lacked energy and she looked quite lonely. At this rate, Harper could end up isolated. I decided to prepare my wife for the worst and tell her about yesterday's call and Harper's situation today. Even though she'd been aware, my wife was shocked to hear the news and was worried about Harper, who had been excluded, yet pretended everything was all right. We decided to change the situation somehow and consulted Harper's teacher. However, nothing seemed particularly amiss in front of the teacher, and we were simply told,
"I'll keep an eye on it."
But day by day, Harper seemed to be losing her cheer. I wondered if there was a way to give her an opportunity for change. That's when I remembered the parent-child camp, organized by the school, that was taking place next weekend. Although it was school-organized, it wasn't mandatory to attend, and due to my work schedule, we hadn't planned on participating. Hey, Harper, how about we join the parent-child camp next week?
But you don't have to work?
I think I can work it out, so I thought it might be nice to go camping together. What do you think?
Yes, I want to go.
Harper smiled joyfully. It felt like I hadn't seen that smile in a while. From then on, I worked overtime to clear my work, contacted the relevant parties, and somehow managed to free up some time for the camp. Finally, the day of the parent-child camp arrived. The venue was bustling, and we saw parents and children happily chatting together in groups of mothers engrossed in conversation. Among them, we also saw Riley, chatting with familiar moms beside Avery. Deciding to build friendly ties, we approached other parents at the event. "Hello, our daughter Harper is always talking about your children." I greeted a woman who seemed to be the mother of one of Harper's friends, but after briefly nodding at me, she quickly left without a word. Huh? My wife was also trying to engage with others, but just like with me, people quickly exited our conversation. Before we knew it, we were isolated. Suddenly, a chuckle reached our ears. We turned and found Riley smirking at us. The same people who had walked away were now gathering around Riley, sneaking glances our way. Damn, was this her doing? I was furious at Riley's subtle bullying, but this was a special family camp. We couldn't let it ruin our day. Harper, let's start our activities. What are we making again?
Dad, weren't you listening? We're making barbecue. First, we need to start the fire.
That's right. Good job. Harper, I'll go grab the materials. In my haste to get everything ready, I saw my wife and Harper laughing. Their laughter eased my worries. I'm glad you laughed. Despite the isolation, I tried my best to make sure they had fun. As the sky began to turn the color of the setting sun, we finally enjoyed our barbecue. It was refreshing and delicious to enjoy a meal we had all made together.
You all seem so close. How lovely.
Just then, as if on cue, Riley showed up to disrupt our peaceful moment. What do you want?
Oh, nothing. Just admiring how leisurely unemployed people seem to be. Lucky Harper, getting to camp because of her low-income daddy.
Riley's mocking was loud enough for everyone to hear. The other parents followed Riley's lead and started laughing too. The situation was unbearable. My wife clenched her jaw in frustration, while Harper looked down, on the verge of tears. Riley, I took a day off to be here. Can you please leave us alone?
I bet your boss is thrilled to have an incompetent worker like you take the day off. You know my husband is a CEO. He's busy every single day.
Surrounded by supportive parents, Riley continued to belittle us. Just then, a man walked in from the entrance of the campsite. Sorry I'm late.
Daddy! Dear, is everything okay with your work?
It seemed Riley's husband had finally arrived. Yeah, I finished it up a little early today. Is Avery having a good time?
Of course, I've been having a lovely chat with the other moms, too.
Riley stood next to her husband, showing off her successful spouse to everyone. Basking in the admiration of the other parents, Riley seemed quite pleased. Her husband engaged with the crowd for a while, but then seemed to notice us off in the distance. Riley, who's that family over there?
Ah, the new folks in town. Look at that man over there, not working from the morning like the rest of us. It's such a shame to watch. And you're so much better than him.
Hold on a second. That man is... Riley's husband hastily approached me. Indeed, if it isn't Mr. Peterson, the company president. It's been a while. I never thought we'd meet here. Huh, you know me. Seeing her husband hurriedly greet me, Riley could hardly hide her bewilderment. Riley, why don't you greet him too? This man is the president of an important client company. They're developing drones.
This guy is a company president?
Riley looked at me with disbelief. Yes, I am the president of a drone development company. My wife is the vice president. Originally, it was a small startup with just a few employees, but now, thanks to our efforts, it has grown to rank among the top 10 fastest growing companies across the country. Riley's husband's company, which is making notable progress in agriculture, logistics, and research by utilizing drones, has come to rely heavily on the drones my company produces.
By the way, Mr. Peterson, why are you in this town? I thought you were residing in New York.
The local politician asked me to create a new industry here, to bring life back to the town and make it more youth-friendly. I'm originally from here and have always loved this town, so I was moved by the politician's passionate request.
Is that so? That's very like you, Mr. Peterson.
No, I'm flattered. As she listened to our conversation, Riley turned pale beside her husband. Riley, are you all right? Her husband showed concern for Riley's ashen complexion.
No, it's nothing really. Mom, you were being mean to Harper and Harper's mom and dad just now.
Avery, despite her daughter's attempts to hide the truth, Avery inadvertently revealed what had happened. What? What's going on? Avery, can you explain further?
It's nothing really. We were just talking.
I'm asking Avery, not you. So, what happened?
Mom told me before. She said I couldn't play with Harper. I wanted to be friends with Harper, but she got mad at me and told me I'd be in trouble if I did.
Avery hung her head in sadness.
Mom also said really mean things to Harper and her family until Dad came. She called them stupid and incompetent. I wanted to tell her to stop, but I was too scared of Mom.
Riley, what have you said to Mr. Peterson and his family? Hearing Avery's story, Riley's husband reprimanded her with a pale face.
I'm sorry. I didn't know it was like this.
Even if you didn't know, you've always judged people's worth by their money and education too much. You dismiss everyone as worthless. Your words could potentially destroy my company.
What? That's a lie.
Understanding the gravity of her actions, Riley's voice trembled and her eyes filled with tears.
But why didn't you say anything until now? You could have talked back at any point.
Unable to comprehend, Riley questioned me with a puzzled look on her face. We didn't want to bicker over status and money in front of our children, making fools of ourselves. Didn't that embarrass you? I added. Riley mumbled, her face turning bright red. I'm so sorry, sir. I can't believe what my wife has done to you and your family. Riley's husband was profusely apologizing to me, his head bowed in deep remorse.
I'm so sorry. It's all my fault. Please don't cut ties with my husband's company.
Riley, too, was desperately begging for forgiveness. Don't worry, I'm not going to end our business dealings.
Really?
Yeah, but I have one favor to ask. I turned to face Riley squarely. At this, Riley's face tensed. Could you try to get along better with my wife and daughter from now on? They've just moved here and are likely feeling quite unsettled. Upon hearing this, Avery, who had been watching from a distance, spoke up to Riley, looking apologetic.
Mom, you told me I couldn't play with Harper, but I really want to be friends with her. Is that okay?
Yes, do as you wish. At those words, Avery, looking pleased, ran over to Harper.
Harper, I'm sorry for leaving you out. Avery, it's okay.
Harper agreed to a truce and shook hands with Avery.
Harper, let's go play with everyone over there.
The two of them held hands and ran off towards their friends, smiling all the way. I watched them, marveling at the resilience of children. Kids are amazing, even at such a young age. They have their own wills, can apologize honestly, and move forward. That's something we adults struggle with.
At my words,
Riley murmured.
Yes, that's true. I was wrong about you. I've been judging you based on the past. You've become such a remarkable person since we parted ways. I'm sorry.
Haha, so you've finally seen the light, huh? Thinking about our children and their future, I decided to forgive what Riley had said and done. I didn't want our issues as parents to affect our children's futures. After the camping trip, Riley stopped looking down on me and bragging incessantly about her husband to the other parents. Furthermore, she has begun to open up slowly but surely to my wife and Harper. Harper, who was downcast just a few days ago, is no longer ostracized, and she's back to the bright, kind child she used to be. Now, she's become Avery's best friend, leading a happy school life almost every day. Now, we feel blessed to hear Harper's sincere words about how she's happy.
Will you be working late today?
Yeah, I have an important meeting with a client, I replied, gathering my work documents into a bag and preparing to leave the house.
Dad?
Suddenly, Harper dashed to the front door, halting my attempt to open it. What's up, Harper? Did you forget something?
No, that's not it. There's something I want to say.
Oh, what's the formal tone all of a sudden?
Well, I know I've said a lot of things before, but I think you're really cool. Dad, working so hard all the time. Thanks for always doing so much for us.
With that, Harper bashfully handed me something red. Is this a good luck charm?
Yeah, Avery and I made it together at her house yesterday. It's to wish you joy as you work hard every day. There were some tricky parts, but Avery's mom helped a bit.
I see. Thanks, Harper. I'll treasure it. I carefully stowed the slightly awkward charm in my bag. Well then, I'm off.
Okay, take care.
With a smile on my lips, I cheerfully opened the front door to start another day.
I am Serena, a 27-year-old woman. I just got married recently. Back home, my father and brother treated me terribly, but it wasn't just me. My mother also suffered at their hands. We women were treated like slaves. If my father or brother commanded something, we had to act immediately. We'd be scolded for being slow if we didn't move fast enough. It was like this since I was little. Why are you so slow? Just get it done already. Yes, Dad. You can't even do this much and you're in elementary school? What a disgrace. That's why women are useless. Don't say that, Dad. Shut up and be quiet. I don't want to be called Dad by you. I've been doing chores since preschool, but it got worse once I started elementary school. While my father and brother relaxed, my mother and I were constantly busy. Whenever they wanted a drink, we had to bring it right away. Even in the depth of winter, if they wanted ice cream, we had to go out to the convenience store in the cold. So my mother and I were always exhausted. My mother felt sorry for me and cried all the time. I'm sorry. It's because I'm weak that they treat you like this, Serena. No, Mom. Serena, you have to leave this house someday, stand on your own 2 feet, and run away from your dad and brother. But what about you, Mom? I'll be fine, as long as you're happy, Serena. When I reached 10th grade, I thought about going to college, but my father said women didn't need education. He had a very old-fashioned mindset, thinking a high school diploma was enough for a woman. But I was in college prep school, and all my friends were planning on going to college. I loved studying, and I was determined to go to college. Despite this, my father wouldn't allow it. But at that time, my mother stood up against my father. I'd never seen her so determined. She excels at her studies. That's why I'm going to let her go to college. What? Are you challenging me? How many times do I have to say that women don't need an education? What good will it do when all she'll be doing is cooking once she's married? An education will never go to waste. It'll come in handy even after she's married and has kids. Then do what you want. But I'm not paying for the tuition. Fine, then I'll take care of it. My mother had some savings, and she used it to support my college education. I got accepted into my first choice university, a private one. I felt guilty about the expense, but thanks to that, I met my husband. I had always been afraid of men, but he changed that for me. He was so kind when we met at our college club. He was always cheerful and could make anyone laugh. Having grown up impressed by my father and brother, for the first time, I felt something positive towards a man. I started to think that I wouldn't mind dating someone like him, but I couldn't bring myself to confess, and I kept my feelings hidden. In the end, we didn't date during our college years. After graduation, I ran into him at a reunion. He had changed a lot and had become a sophisticated city man. My family home was in New York, but in a rural area, and I had lived in an apartment during my university years. After graduation, I had been working in Manhattan, where I was known as Plain Jane at my company. I wasn't sure if a plain Jane like me was suitable to be with him, but he asked me to come over, so I did. We reminisced about our old club days and ended up dating. After a year and a half, he formally proposed, and that's how we got married. After creating my own family, I was worried about my mother back at my old home. I felt sick thinking she was still being abused by my father and brother. "Hello, Mom. How are you doing these days?" "I'm fine. More importantly, are you doing okay, Serena?" "I'm fine, really. Danny helps out with the chores. He's probably even a better cook than me." "Oh, is that so? I guess he got that from his father, who's a chef, right?" "Maybe. Don't worry about me, okay? And you need to take care of yourself, Mom." Yes, I got it." Mom said this in her usual kind voice, but somehow I had a bad feeling. I had the hunch she was in trouble, due to my father and brother's horrible treatment. They despised us for being women, but my mother in particular was targeted. It was because of the scar on her face. She had an accident before I was born, which left a prominent scar. My father would call it hideous and disgusting, so my mom always covered the right side of her face with her hair where the scar was. It was heartbreaking that my mother, who got injured defending my father, was being called ugly. It was clear my father didn't appreciate her at all. Even my brother was cruel, saying things like, "Don't come to the open house, you're disgusting." I thought those were things one should never say, even if they are family. One day my husband and I were enjoying a happy hour. In the heat of midsummer, we were sipping chilled beer while nibbling on snacks. Suddenly, our home doorbell rang. It was just before 9 p.m., and we wondered who it could be at such an hour. Stepping out with my husband, we found Mom standing there. "Oh, Danny. Mother-in-law, what brings you here at this hour?" "Could you lend me $20? I'm sorry for bothering you, Serena and Danny." $20 is fine, but what happened?" "I thought I'd head to a motel or something." "A motel? What are you planning to do there now?" "As long as I can get some sleep, that's enough." "What?" "I was kicked out of the house by your dad and his lot. I don't have any money." I froze in shock. When I asked her to tell me more, the details were beyond horrific. After dinner that day, Mom had been doing the usual housework. That's when Dad and brother started demanding more alcohol and ice cream. So Mom left the house with just her coin purse and smartphone. But when she got home, the door was locked from the inside. "Unlock the door, I brought the drinks and stuff." "Just leave it there. We don't need you anymore." "What?" "Drop whatever you bought and disappear. A worthless wife like you." And that left my mom completely lost. She had used up almost all of her coins and couldn't even afford a taxi. So she had to walk all the way to our house. "That's what happened? That's awful." "Maybe I'm just useless now." "Hey, Serena, let's live together with your mother." "Really? Are you sure?" "Yeah, I don't mind. We have extra rooms. She can use one." "But I can't be in the way of newlyweds." "It's all right. I consider you like my own mother." "Thank you." Oh, my mom burst into tears, sobbing. She must have been touched by my husband's kindness, something she was likely unaccustomed to. My husband, having lost his mother at a young age, was a hard worker raised by his chef father. He graduated from college on a scholarship, so he understands people's pain. Having such a husband, I realized how lucky I am. He was the polar opposite of my father and brother. From then on, we started our life as a three. Whenever we came home, Mom always had a hot meal ready for us. "You don't have to go to all the trouble. Danny and I can do housework too." "It's all right. I want to do this." "Thank you, Mom." I feel a bit guilty. After a comforting home-cooked meal from Mom, I was relaxing when the doorbell rang. At the door were my father and older brother. "You're here after all. How dare you send me a text like that? What's with, 'I don't want to be with you anymore'?" he bellowed. So what? I simply told you how I felt, she retorted. Oh, you're pretty bold. When did you start acting so high and mighty? He sneered. You were the one who told me to leave, right? So I'm saying, let's get a divorce, she shrugged. Well, I don't really need an old lady like you around, but if we're divorcing, pay me alimony, he demanded. Excuse me? My father was demanding alimony from my mother in case of a divorce. I wondered what had happened. Isn't that young guy I saw you with your new boyfriend? That's cheating, isn't it? He accused. No, it isn't, she responded. Oh, you two seem pretty close, though. We didn't do anything strange. I had no idea that my mother had been with a younger man. I started to panic. Was my mother really having an affair? If she was, it would be disadvantageous for her since she and my father were not yet divorced. If my father was right, she might get sued. So I glanced at my mother, but she just winked at me. It must mean everything will be okay. You dirty, tainted old woman. You won't be able to survive on your own once we divorce. Ha ha! Go ahead. Pay me and live your pitiful life, he scorned. I don't mind if we divorce. I have a job, she stated. Huh? The young man you saw me with is a business partner of mine. He's a very talented and wonderful person. Job? But you've always been a housewife. I've been working from home, even without a computer. A smartphone is all I need. I occasionally meet him for discussions. So that was it. So I have $50,000 in my bank. Even if I divorce you, there won't be any problem. My father was dumbfounded. My brother had the same shocked expression. Neither my father nor my brother knew my mother had been working. But I was the only one who knew. She had told me secretly. She had said to keep it a secret from Dad and my brother, probably fearing they would depend on her financially. Oh, I see. Let's start over. Come back home. My father said this as soon as he found out about the money, but my mother coldly replied, Why would I? I'm not coming back. I'll divorce you. Huh? Why? I'm offering to live with you. Why are you so condescending? I'm not weak like before. I don't need someone like you, cheating man. Eh? At the words cheating man coming from my mother, my father seemed shocked. My brother standing next to him was also surprised. Didn't you say something to my business partner, Emma? She asked. Well, he's dating a woman younger than Serena. It's repulsive, downright disgusting. No, you've got it all wrong. It's a misunderstanding. What's there to misunderstand? Can you say the same after looking at this photo? My mother was showing a picture she had found on her phone. It was a picture of my father being cozy with a young woman named Emma. They seemed too close, and their faces were almost touching. I found myself thinking how gross this old man was. It was shocking to think that this pervert was my father. But how did my mother find out about the connection between my father and Emma, one of her business associates? There was a reason. One day she had gone to a cafe for a face-to-face meeting with Emma. Though they also met online, they made a point to meet in person once a month. During that meeting, my mother noticed the ring on Emma's finger. Apparently, it looked exactly like one my mother had bought for herself years ago. So she complimented Emma on her ring. Emma replied, Thank you. My boyfriend, an older gentleman, gave it to me. It's secondhand, but I love it because it's quite valuable. This made my mother suspect that my father might have given Emma the ring. This diamond and emerald ring was custom made for my mother, so there was no other like it in the world. Given that it was an original design, my mother suspected that my father had given it to his mistress, Emma. When she returned home and opened her jewelry box, she discovered the ring was indeed missing. That was when my mother was convinced. So I'll be asking for compensation for the affair, and we're getting a divorce. What? Who's going to do all the housework then? Really? You and your son can handle it, can't you? Both my father and brother were hopeless at domestic chores. Being unable to do anything, they had dumped everything on us women. So they would be in trouble if my mother left. I couldn't help wondering why they had chased my mother out in the first place. That's when I decided to intervene. If you're going to be in trouble without Mom, why did you chase her away in the first place? That was just to spite the mistress. What? I just wanted the other woman to suffer. I'm not the bad guy here. You're still saying that? You're the one who cheated. You're the worst. So disgusting. I had never been able to stand up to my father or brother before, but things are different now. I had a strong ally in my husband, and my mother had become stronger. I had to become stronger too to protect myself, my husband, and my mother. Feeling this way naturally, I was able to stand up to my father. My brother was crying and whining, saying he didn't know what to do next. Apparently, he can't even make an omelet. The only dishes he could make were bacon and eggs and salad. I wondered if those even counted as cooking. If they were so incapable of cooking, they could just live on instant ramen for the rest of their lives. My mother wasn't a housekeeper or a slave. Why should she have to come home cheerfully after being cheated on? My father and brother were out of their minds, I could tell. They couldn't hold a proper conversation. Well then, since it's decided, we need to get prepared. I have to find a good lawyer. Hold on! I don't care anymore. I'm definitely getting a divorce, be it mediation or a trial, it doesn't matter. I've suffered emotional distress from you, and I might be able to get a lot of compensation money. No way, I don't want that. My brother was smirking at this point. Even if a divorce occurs, the parent-child relationship won't end. So he said he would still be able to inherit when our mother passed away. But it didn't turn out that way. Gaston, I'm not leaving you any inheritance. After all, you've been so insulting towards me. I won't let someone like that inherit anything. Did you know? If I specify in my will, I can prevent the distribution of my assets to you. Once again, my brother's eyes widened in surprise. It seemed he never thought his constant insults could backfire this badly. He probably didn't realize that this was the outcome of heaping profound insults on the person from whom he was to inherit. He cried out loud, almost too loudly. We lived in an apartment and his cries echoed down the hallways. I thought it might disturb the neighbors. A man from next door, who looked kind of scary, whom we tried not to interact with, came out due to the noise. He yelled at my father and brother and they scampered off like they were running for their lives. Then my mother divorced my father. It was a tough battle, but she managed to secure a hefty compensation. She cut off all ties with Emma, my father's mistress. After that, my father seemed totally downcast. My brother, too, upon realizing he won't inherit anything, spent every day in gloom. My father's work suffered and he was gradually pushed into less significant roles. Finally, he voluntarily quit. My brother, who was a freelancer, couldn't make ends meet with his income alone. He reached out to me for help, but I ignored him. Of course, I blocked his calls and messages. After that, my mother moved to a different apartment. She said she felt guilty staying with us. My husband felt lonely, but I thought some distance might be a good thing. Even now, we three occasionally have dinner together, and it's truly enjoyable. But soon, we will become 4. That's because I am pregnant. I have no intention of letting my child meet their grandfather. I can't bear the thought of letting such a disgusting man hold my child. From now on, for my husband, my mother, and my child, I plan to become a stronger woman.
Finally, Dad's gone. What a relief. He was a stubborn old man with money, but he was nothing but an annoyance.
On the day of his father's funeral, Alex spoke these words with a smirk on his face. How could you say something like that? You had debts that Dad took over.
Shut up. He wouldn't die and kept costing me money in hospital bills. Now I can use his money as I please.
How dare you? You relied on Dad all this time.
Say whatever you want. You don't have anyone on your side anymore, you good for nothing. Should just leave.
Brother-in-law, how could you? William also scolded Alex, but their sister-in-law present at the scene laughed and commanded us. Marriage doesn't make you a family. I bet even your father-in-law wouldn't want outsiders at his funeral. You should leave immediately. Her words snapped something inside me. To insult my father and deny my ties? These people are rotten to the core. Arguing with them any further would be pointless, and the last thing I wanted was to cause a fuss that would ruin my father's funeral. I suppressed the anger that threatened to explode. I understand. I barely managed to say that much before I decided to give up my final farewell to my father and leave. I vowed never to associate with these people again. My name is Lily. I work as a nurse in a children's hospital. I married William, a radiologic technologist I met at work a few years ago. It's difficult to find time for just the two of us due to on-call schedules, but we cherish the moments we do get. Being a radiologic technologist is a significant responsibility as imaging is crucial for diagnosing and treating patients' diseases. Handling dozens of imaging tasks every day and capturing even the smallest abnormalities come with considerable pressure. Despite the demanding job, I respect William for his hard work every day. He tells me he admires my dedication, always making time to communicate with our patients and their guardians despite my busy schedule. Once upon a time, I could hardly believe I would be of such help to others, nor did I dream that such happy days were in my future. My father worked for a major trading company. When I was a child, he often worked abroad, leaving my mother, Alex, and me to fend for ourselves at home. In that setup, my mother and Alex treated me like a servant.
Didn't I tell you to clean this up? You're so useless.
Hey, Lily, go get me a juice now. You've got a minute.
This kind of harsh language and ordering around was all too common. My mother, adoring Alex, treated me as if I was nothing but a nuisance. Seeing my mother's attitude, Alex grew up to be the type to boss me around. As a child, I tried my best to meet their expectations. But contrary to my efforts, both my mother and Alex continued to belittle me. Even when my father returned from his overseas assignment when I was in high school, their attitudes didn't change. My father tried to defend me, but my mother and Alex blamed him.
I raised these two all by myself while you were gone. You didn't lift a finger to help, and now you're going to complain?
Just because you're back now doesn't mean you get to play dad. We have our own dynamics here. We managed fine without you. Don't act all high and mighty.
My father argued with them, but no resolution came. Then the focus of their anger shifted from my father, who provided for the family, to me. Seeing this, my father couldn't confront my mother and Alex, fearing it would make things worse for me. Despite his presence, he regretted that he couldn't change my mother and Alex's attitude, and he tearfully apologized to me.
I'm sorry.
But just his being there saved me. Being treated by my mother and Alex as a useless and nuisance, I lost sight of my self-worth, feeling as if I were in a dark tunnel. But then my father said to me,
Lily, you're not useless. You're not a nuisance. You're our family, and you're a good person who belongs here.
Just these words were enough for me. Even when my mother and Alex belittled or ordered me around like before, just knowing that my father was there, my heart wouldn't darken. Then, when I was about to graduate high school, my mother told me to start working after graduation, forbidding me from going to college. All the while Alex, who barely studied, got to go to a private university and goof around. But even then, my father wouldn't stay silent when my mother tried to single-handedly crush the options for my future. My father asked me what I wanted to do and told me that I could decide my own future. Having been at the beck and call of my mother and Alex for so long, I hadn't even thought about my future. But at this point, I seriously considered what I wanted to do. I wanted to do a job where I could be of help to people, so I decided I wanted to become a nurse. When I voiced my desire, my father secretly arranged for me to go to nursing school, paying the entrance fees and arranging a place for me to stay, all without my mother or Alex noticing. And so I was able to enroll in nursing school without a hitch. Since then, I have only returned home when my mother passed away. But even after I went to nursing school, I kept in touch with my father. When I secured my first job, passed my national exams, started dating William, and even when we decided to get married, my father was over the moon. He was as happy for me as if these were his own achievements. On the other hand, I was worried about him being all alone at home. But he insisted,
I'm fine, really.
brushing off any concerns I voiced. My father, who never showed any signs of weakness, mentioned one day on the phone that he was experiencing a bit of pain around his midsection. Even though he said it was just a bit painful, I knew he was probably downplaying it. I suggested that he should visit the hospital. Days later, he informed me that his endoscopy showed no issues. I felt relieved at the news, but my husband William was skeptical. He said that there could still be a problem that wasn't detectable with just an endoscopy and suggested a cancer screening as a precaution. I relayed this to my father and urged him to go for it. And then the results came in. My father had pancreatic cancer. While it was a shocking revelation, we were told the cancer was still at a stage where it could be surgically removed. So my father was admitted for surgery. The news had initially plunged me into darkness, but luckily the operation was a success. When William and I visited him in the hospital, although his fatigue was evident, he greeted us with a smile. Just as I started to feel a bit relieved at seeing my father looking better than expected, the door to his room swung open abruptly. There stood Alex and a woman. With a fleeting glance, Alex acknowledged our presence but barged into the room without a care.
Get out,
he said, tilting his chin towards the door as if we were in his way. The woman next to him was also gesturing for us to leave. I quickly realized that she must be Grace, the woman Alex had married. Having heard about Alex's marriage from my father, I intuitively felt that this must be his wife, Grace. Can't you wait a little? We just got here, I protested. But Alex just smirked disdainfully at me.
Like talking to Dad is going to improve his condition.
I know, but I've barely had a chance to speak with him.
Brother-in-law, give us some more time, please.
My husband also tries to reason with Alex, but Alex bluntly barks back at us.
You're the guy who married Lily, huh? I don't care if you're a radiology tech or whatever. At the end of the day, without doctors, nurses, and techs can't do a thing, so don't get all cocky.
He smirks smugly, an ugly twist in his lips. And before we even leave our seats, Alex turns to our father and starts spouting out the unbelievable.
Dad, I've gotten myself into debt again. Need your help once more.
What? Shocked at Alex's words, I can't help but let out a gasp. No words of concern for our father's condition, Alex starts talking about money out of the blue, and once more implies that he's made our father shoulder his debts before. Alex, you have to deal with the debts you made yourself. Do you even understand what kind of situation Dad is in right now?
Shut up, I'm making Dad atone for his past mistakes.
Atone?
He's making up for neglecting us when we were kids, saying he will forgive us for ignoring our precious childhood because of money. Isn't he kind?
What? I never imagined Alex could be such a despicable person. His words leave me flabbergasted, and I can't find my words. I have to do something. I'm the only one who can stop Alex here. I think this and start to find words to retort, but my sister-in-law standing next to Alex looks at me with a puzzled face.
Don't get all high and mighty just because you're married. You're in the way, so go home.
I snap at my sister-in-law's words, and I don't have the luxuries to stay calm. That's enough. Forgetting that I'm in a hospital room, I can't help but raise my voice.
Lily, stop.
William quickly stops me, and I'm taken aback. It was then.
Lily, you should go home for today.
Our father quietly said so and gave us a listless smile.
Thank you for today. You can come again some other day.
Hearing our father's words, Alex and his wife looked triumphant. I couldn't shake off the unease of leaving father and Alex and his wife alone. However, feeling guilty about shouting in the hospital room, I felt I couldn't argue here any longer and left the hospital room. A few days passed with worry about father and Alex's relationship, and one day, my father developed complications. The shock of developing complications was immeasurable for father. Moreover, Dad's mental and physical strength had dwindled as he stopped eating properly. As a result, despite the efforts of the attending physician, father passed away a few weeks later. A grief I had never felt in my life attacked me, but I didn't have time to indulge in my grief. Despite the fact that father had died, Alex and his wife did nothing. Therefore, all arrangements related to the funeral were undertaken by William and me. On the day of the funeral, while greeting the attendees and waiting for the funeral to begin, Alex, oblivious that this is a funeral, grinned broadly.
I feel so relieved now that Dad is finally gone. He was stubborn and only cared about money, and he was a nuisance.
What? Dad took on your debt and you still speak ill of him?
Shut up. His medical bills were just too much, and now I can finally use his money as I please.
How could you, after all you've taken from Dad?
Say whatever you want. No one's on your side anymore, so get lost. My own brother-in-law, I can't believe this.
Even as William defended me, our sister-in-law smirked and gestured us away.
Married into the family doesn't mean you're actually part of it. I bet even your father-in-law wouldn't want outsiders sticking around. Go home.
Hearing her words, something inside me snapped. To disrespect my father and to dismiss my connection to this family? These people were beyond redemption. There was no point in arguing with them. And the last thing I wanted was to disrupt Dad's funeral with a scene. I swallowed down my boiling anger. Fine. I forced the words out and decided to leave, giving up my final farewell with Dad. I vowed never to deal with these people again. But the next day, my phone was flooded with calls from Alex and his wife. I had a hunch about what they wanted, but I ignored them all. Alex didn't care about me enough to know where I lived. If I kept ignoring him, he would give up eventually. Or so I thought, but Alex exceeded my expectations. hiring a detective to find me and showing up at my apartment.
Hey, why aren't you answering your phone? We've been trying to reach you.
Get out here! Do you know how much trouble we have had trying to find you?
The moment they saw me, they started yelling, letting out their pent-up frustration. Before I could respond, they rattled off their grievances.
Is that lawyer telling the truth that all of Dad's inheritance goes to you?
That can't be right, can it? We're siblings, so the inheritance should be divided equally, right? If anything, you're the younger one, so you should get less.
When I remained silent, Alex roared,
Say something.
It was funny how they were the ones who didn't give me a chance to speak. What the lawyer said is true. I was surprised when I found out too.
No way, so you're saying you get all of Dad's $10 million? I won't accept that.
Whether you accept it or not doesn't matter, Alex. This has already been decided.
You think you can talk back to me? You've always been useless and you couldn't even help Dad when he needed it. You should just do as I say for the rest of your life.
Alex was hell-bent on acquiring the inheritance by any means necessary, refusing to face the inconvenient reality, but his attempts were futile. After all, our father had expressly excluded Alex from the list of heirs. Whether Alex accepts it or not, it doesn't matter. This is already settled.
No way.
Lies? Alex, you made Dad pay off your gambling debts, calling it atonement. Plus, you used Dad's stockholder benefits without permission and sold its belongings. Also, Dad had taken measures to ensure that Alex could not inherit his property, citing insults from Alex and my sister-in-law among other reasons. What you guys did is enough to lose inheritance rights. Get it and leave. Don't ever show up in front of me again. Alex and his wife, who had been furiously screaming, seemed to finally grasp the reality as they listened to me. Proof of this was their faces turning ashen. Leaving them to their distress, I started to return to my room, but my sister-in-law pleaded with a voice similar to a scream.
Wait, please share the inheritance with us.
Even now, my sister-in-law begged for the inheritance. When I shot her a cold look, she started babbling even without being asked.
We thought we would get Dad's inheritance, so we bought a condominium in the Highlands.
Huh?
We borrowed money from a pretty risky source, thinking we could pay it back quickly. If we don't return it soon, the interest won't be a joke. Please share the inheritance with us.
Apparently, not only did Alex and his wife buy a condominium in the Highlands, but after Dad passed away, they lived a life of luxury, gambling more than usual and splurging on brand goods. That's not my problem, I said. Upon hearing this, Alex shouted in panic.
You've always done what I said, right? You should just obey me.
When was that? Through my job, I've met a husband with whom I can respect each other and contribute to society. I'm different from the person I was then. Don't you think you can have it your way with me forever? As I raised my voice to match Alex, he fell to his knees on the spot and still clung to me in tears.
Alex is asking for help as a family, and you should help him.
My sister-in-law also raised her voice and appealed to me, but I spat out sharply. Weren't you the one who called me a stranger after insulting Dad and denying my relationship with him? I have no obligation to help you guys anymore.
What? How dare you?
If you keep loitering, I'll call the police. Are you okay with that? At the mention of the word police, Alex and his wife disappeared from our sight as if running away. Afterwards, at the memorial service, I met relatives and heard a stream of complaints about Alex. Alex and his wife had been appalling at Dad's funeral with sloppy speeches as funeral organizers and lack of proper manners, leaving all the relatives dumbfounded. Apparently, after a lawyer told Alex he had no inheritance rights, he went around asking all the relatives to tell him where I was. But no one told him, so he had to hire a detective. But when my plans fell through, even after hiring a private investigator, Alex was reduced to begging our relatives for money, his head bowed in desperation, I heard. Still, our relatives, disgusted with Alex and his wife, refused to lend them any money. It seems they ended up fleeing somewhere without anything but the clothes on their backs to escape from their debtors. And now, months later, apparently Alex and his wife are still stuck in a loop, constantly running whenever their debtors catch up with them. I imagine his wife must be sick of such a life, but she can't make a living on her own. No doubt, she is unable to leave Alex and they must be quarreling daily. On the other hand, William and I, unable to attend my father's funeral, visit his grave once a month. Thanks to my father's support, I have been able to become a nurse and I found William the love of my life. Through this career, I plan to appreciate him every day and continue to do my very best, whatever that may be.
Hey, why are you acting like it's normal to show up? Auntie, I told you to skip my wedding. My niece sneered as she asked me not to attend her wedding. Ever since my brother passed away 11 years ago, I had raised her like she was my own daughter. But there was a reason she suddenly started hurting such harsh words at me. My name is Effie, and my brother, Jason, was 12 years older than me. Jason was a kind soul. When we were young, he'd hold my hand as we ran errands, help me practice riding my bicycle, and shower me with love. The year I entered middle school was also the year my beloved brother got married and moved out. I remember Jason and his wife's wedding being full of joy. I clapped so hard my palms ached. The following year, a baby girl was born to Jason and his wife, Mary. Being the youngest in the family, I was thrilled to have a little sister-like figure in my life. We named her Heidi, and I loved her as much as my brother had loved me. Even after Heidi was born, my brother and his wife continued to dote on me, and from middle school to high school, I frequently visited their home and spent time as a part of their family. While sitting at lunch one day, I thought to myself that I hadn't seen Heidi in a while. I was now 27 years old and working for a major fruit wholesale company, directly dealing with fruit farmers for various regions. I was not initially familiar with agriculture, but I learned a bit each day by listening to the voices of the producers, and I was now a leading staff among the employees, trusted with guiding my colleagues. One stormy day, I received sudden news that shocked me. That day, a typhoon was approaching, and we finished work a bit earlier than usual. Still, the weather outside was incredibly violent during my commute home. With gusts of wind so powerful, they threatened to carry me away. It was on such a stormy day that my brother, under the orders of his boss, had been forced to go out on sales rounds. Jason was very earnest and hardworking. Even on that day, he was trying to make sales even in the adverse weather and didn't slack off. As he walked through the strong wind, a sign from a building fell and struck him directly. I heard about my brother's death, and I somehow managed to get my trembling legs to take me to the hospital. By the time I arrived, everyone was already there, and my parents were hunched over, crying silently. Seeing my parents crying and the painful sight of my brother, I couldn't help but shed tears, even though I still couldn't believe what had happened. Even though I understood the situation, the reality was too hard to accept. I sat next to my brother and cried. I noticed Mary and Heidi, Jason's wife and daughter, looking as if they were in a daze, not sobbing but simply staring blankly at the wall. Thinking it best to leave them be, I felt so sorry for them. From then on, we supported each other as a family even more than before. Mary, who is currently on leave from work, was a part-time worker within the scope of dependent support, and she will need a job in the future to sustain her life. My parents and I decided to support Heidi and Mary's future, including her re-employment with all our might. About a year after the funeral, Mary, who had returned to part-time work, decided to move because the rent was becoming too much for her current income. She had received compensation and workers' compensation insurance from Jason's company due to the accident at work, and of course, we agreed with Mary's prudent decision. But on the day of the move, when we went to help, we found only Heidi crying in the somewhat tidied room. Heidi, holding a letter that said her mother couldn't raise her on her own, was only 16 years old. It seemed that Mary had called us to help with the move to ensure her daughter was taken care of after she left. Reading the letter, I felt a tightness in my chest, wondering if Mary had been so anxious that she wanted to run away after Jason's death. From the contents of the letter and what Heidi told me, it seemed that Mary believed it would be better for Heidi to be raised by our family than by her, who was economically unstable. Although it said she was thinking of Heidi first, what she did was equivalent to abandoning her high school daughter. Of course, I was angry at Mary, and we even went to search for her at her parents' house. However, the people who came out of the house were a family we didn't know, and we learned that not only Mary, but also her parents had moved. We contacted Mary's relatives, but there was no family willing to live with Heidi, who was a high school student and had the prospect of significant expenses for college. As a result of our discussions, we decided to take care of Heidi in my house with the support of my parents. Despite the difficult times, Heidi smiled and said, "Effie, please take good care of me." And I hugged her tightly. 11 years have passed since then, and Heidi graduated from college and found a job at a local company. When she brought up a serious conversation, I felt the passage of time and nodded. "You're 27 now, after all." Seeing that, Heidi blushed a little and said, "Effie, I'm getting married." She met her boyfriend through a friend, and he was 1 year older than Heidi, and he seemed like a gentle and fine young man from the pictures. According to Heidi, he really cares about her, and although he is usually reliable, he can be a bit off at times, and she likes that part of him too. I was really happy and repeated congratulations so many times that Heidi was amazed. The man seems to be quite busy, and I haven't met him face to face yet. Heidi would try to set up dates for me to see him, but it always falled on days that I was busy. But in spite of her boyfriend's busy schedule, he actively participated in the wedding preparations, and Heidi seemed truly happy. When they shared with me that their ideal plan was beyond their budget, I remember my brother's wonderful wedding. I wanted Heidi to have the most memorable wedding, one that would make her happy for the rest of her life. I provided financial support as much as possible and looked forward to a ceremony filled with Heidi's dreams. On the long-awaited wedding day, as it was time to leave, I urged Heidi to prepare and made my final check on my belongings. I couldn't afford to make a mistake at my daughter's grand event, so I checked multiple times before finally setting off. As I followed Heidi down the hallway, I was already filled with so many emotions. Just the sight of her in her wedding dress was enough to make me tear up. I thought that both the groom and his parents, as well as my late brother in heaven, might laugh at me if they saw me crying so much. Still, I found these moments of contemplation to be a joy. Just as we got to the front door, Heidi turned around abruptly. She smiled gently at me and said, "Don't come, Auntie." "Huh?" "I'm telling you to not attend my wedding, Aunt Effie." I stared at Heidi, unable to comprehend what she had just told me. She burst out laughing at my confusion. "Why do you think you have the right to attend my wedding? No matter how much you did for me, to replace my mother, you're still my aunt, an outsider, right? There's no way I can introduce you as my mother to my guests." The words spoken by my niece, whom I had lived with and cherished for over 10 years, were shockingly hurtful. Indeed, I am not her biological mother. No matter how much time has passed, Heidi never called me her mom. The reality that to Heidi, her only mother was Mary, finally hit me again. I was left speechless by Heidi's words, which she uttered with a smile. There was a moment when I thought, despite having raised her this far, but I realized it was a one-sided and arrogant sentiment. It is indeed regrettable that I cannot witness my daughter's grand event. But if this is for Heidi's happiness, I will do as she says. Suppressing my feelings, I told her that I understood and gave her my blessings and decided to absent myself from the wedding. Several hours later, Heidi returned home while I was still recovering from the shock. She came into the living room laughing cheerfully, and to my surprise, behind her was Mary, who had disappeared 11 years ago. "Long time no see, Effie. You've aged a lot." Mary, who made quite a light-hearted entrance, extended her hand towards me the moment she saw my speechless face. "I'm sure you know that my daughter got married. Give us a gift. $10,000 will do. You'll be down to offer Heidi that amount, right, Auntie Effie?" Her red lipstick-clad mouth curled into a smirk. Heidi, standing next to Mary, echoed her mother's words with a similar smile. As they urged me to cough up the money quickly, the two started revealing a shocking truth. In fact, Mary's disappearance was a scheme to freely spend the insurance money and the funds from my brother's company. Mary, who had been working part-time and left the household finances to my brother, seemed to have completely changed after suddenly coming into a lot of money. Although she had never been poor, she became stingy about spending the money she had acquired, even on her daughter. Once she realized that she could control everything, her greed led her to use me, a single woman with a stable life, to raise Heidi so she could save on major expenses like college tuition. And terrifyingly, this all was a farce that Heidi was aware of. Only our family thought Mary had disappeared. She and Heidi were secretly contacting each other on their phones to prevent us from finding out, and they eventually started meeting once a month. When Heidi became a college student, her spending increased dramatically, and I heard she had started a part-time job, but in reality, she was receiving pocket money from Mary and hanging out. For Heidi, who was in her partying phase, Mary, who gave her money, and let her do as she pleased every month, was undeniably the best mother. That's why Heidi coldly laughed. She deliberately refused to call me mom, knowing how much I loved her as my daughter. After Mary finished revealing the truth about her disappearance, she laughed mockingly and said, "Oh, did you perhaps use up all your savings and can't afford a gift anymore? But well, it was a more lavish ceremony than expected, so I'm proud as a mother who supported her financially for her wedding. Right, Auntie?" Mom, you're so mean. From now on, you should save for yourself. I absolutely won't take care of you after your retirement. It was fun being your pretend daughter, but bye-bye now. The two of them laughed heartily, stating that they would take the wedding expenses as a combination of a wedding gift and severance payment. They declared to cut off ties with me and left the house, claiming to attend their after party and dinner with friends. Left behind, I was too overwhelmed by shock to comprehend the events of the past 11 years. About 30 minutes later, my parents arrived. They had been shocked at the wedding when Mary appeared as Heidi's mother, but didn't want to ruin their granddaughter's big day, so they stayed put until the ceremony ended. Afterwards, they had been looking for Mary. Unable to find her and unable to reach me, they decided to check on me at home. Seeing my parents, I broke down in tears. When I tearfully confessed everything about Heidi and Mary's scheme, my parents were furious. However, even if my parents wanted to talk directly, it seemed that Heidi had already switched off her phone and we couldn't reach her. We could have tried to locate Heidi through Jason's family, but we had raised Heidi because we wanted to. Confronting them would make us feel better, because we never expected anything in return. We could have hired a lawyer to claim back my money, but I just didn't have the courage to sue my own daughter, whom I had cherished and raised for over 10 years. After discussing the situation, we decided to let it go, as they wished. We decided to sever our ties and bury everything in the past. Once free from the situation, I took the bold step of resigning from the company I had been working for and started my own fruit wine manufacturing business. I used domestically produced fruit that could be sold due to irregular shapes or fruits that were partially damaged due to weather conditions to develop and produce my products. My new venture, which I started with the idea of reducing fruit waste while still working at my previous company, gradually gained support from not only farmers but also various supporters due to the growing concern about food waste. Though it was challenging as I embarked on this new journey, the connections I made during my corporate career helped me immensely, and I made steady progress. The business that initially ran at a loss slowly started to increase its sales over 3 to 5 years, and the consistent growth made it a company to watch in the industry. One day, Heidi suddenly visited my office. She was already crying when she arrived and ran towards me as soon as she spotted me. Surprised, but not wanting to cause a scene, I took her into the reception room. "Effie, I'm really sorry for everything. I've reflected on my actions and I need your help. I'm still like a daughter to you, right? After all, we lived together for such a long time. I'm really in trouble, Effie. Please help me financially." A woman, now well over 30, sobbed like a toddler. A receptionist who Heidi seemed to have pushed past arrived out of breath with several other staff members, all trying to drag Heidi out of the office. Watching this scene, I felt disheartened. She was, after all, after my money. According to Heidi, by the time Mary had appeared before me, she had almost exhausted all the money she had. Unaware of this, newlyweds Heidi and Jason expected support from Mary and willingly invited her to live with them. Initially, their life together seemed to go well, but everything changed when they built a new house. Heidi's husband took out a hefty loan to build a house with unique architectural features, expecting his mother-in-law to pay for it. Heidi wanted a kitchen with the latest equipment, and Mary, assuming her son-in-law was well off, chose the best from wallpapers to lighting for her room. Their loan turned out to be a heavy burden as everyone was relying on someone else's money. To make matters worse, their lifestyle was beyond their means, and Mary's money was already depleted. Even so, Mary, claiming to have given Heidi enough pocket money, started asking for money and never worked. This drove Jason to gambling out of stress from his mother-in-law's outrageous behavior. Unbeknownst to Heidi and Mary, Heidi's husband even accrued debt under their names, leaving their household finances in shambles, regardless of how much Heidi worked. We're now trying to sell the house as his parents suggested, but we can't find any buyers. Mom gets fired every time she tries to work, and both my husband and I are exhausted from working overtime every day. You're the only one I can rely on, Effie. If I'm not happy, Dad wouldn't be able to rest in peace either, right? Heidi, desperately appealing to me, reached her hand out while being escorted by my staff, smearing her face with tears and snot as she asked for money. I was slightly relieved to find that my heart was unmoved by this spectacle. The matter of this mother and daughter had firmly become a thing of the past in my mind. Finally, I broke my silence. Do you have an appointment, ma'am? Our company is not a financial institution, so we cannot lend money to strangers. If you're in trouble, please consult a bank or consumer finance company. Stunned, Heidi was lost for words when I turned back her own phrase. Stranger. That one had pushed me to the abyss of despair. Maybe she thought that if she cried and pleaded, she would get help. I followed my staff and led Heidi to the company's entrance. When she still wouldn't budge, I gently pushed her shoulder, guiding her a step outside the entrance. Realizing that I was never going to be her ally, for the first time, Heidi called me Mom. I don't have a daughter, I said. My words must have struck her hard as she turned white and ran away. After that incident, I started receiving spam texts from Heidi and Mary, which all centered around the dire financial situation. I ignored them all, but they persistently requested money or a loan. Seeing this, it's clear that they are struggling under a crushing debt. It would be a nuisance if they call my company's front desk, even if I block their calls. So I'm receiving a bunch of texts, but I have no intention of ever replying. If they ever send something to my company, I might sue them for business obstruction. Finally recovering, I've decided to move abroad to expand my business and study to make better wines. It seems I won't have to face those two for a while, and with anticipation for my new environment, I'm dedicating myself to work every day.
My name is Emmeline. I'm a 34-year-old stay-at-home mom. I live with my same-age husband, Reynolds, and our second-grade daughter, Wendy. After my father-in-law passed away due to illness a few years ago, we moved to a house near my mother-in-law's place, fearing she would be lonely on her own. It was my husband's idea, and since my parents lived nearby as well, it seemed convenient for visiting both families. I have two major concerns in my life. The first is my husband's constant affairs. Reynolds struggles to say no when women flirt with him, and he is easily distracted by new attractions. There were signs of this even when we were dating, but he had vowed to be faithful to me when he proposed. Perhaps it was my fault for choosing him, but I trusted him at that time. Nevertheless, he remained unchanged even after our marriage. Most of his infidelity was indirect, like exchanging messages, but we once nearly divorced due to his reckless behavior. During this crisis, Reynolds seemed genuinely remorseful. Considering my remaining feelings for him and our young daughter, I chose to rebuild our relationship rather than divorce. Still, whenever I see him glued to his phone, I can't help but suspect he is in contact with someone else. The second concern is the presence of my mother-in-law in the neighborhood. Since we moved here, she visits our home without notice whenever she has free time, nagging me relentlessly before she leaves. Initially, I figured she was lonely and tried to be understanding, but her behavior has escalated over time. By the time I realized how unreasonable she was, it was too late to do much about it. She would ruin the food I was preparing, criticize everything even down to the contents of my garbage bags, and generally do whatever she wanted. When I complained, Reynolds would just shrug it off with a silly grin. What's worse, mother-in-law always intervenes in our fights. Apparently, Reynolds would often complain to her, getting her on his side. When we argued about his infidelity in the past, she would side with him, saying,
No wonder he doesn't want to come home to a nagging wife like you.
I was utterly shocked. Whenever mother-in-law attacks me, she always adds,
If only you had given birth to a boy.
It's an outdated view that doesn't fit in today's world. I mean, how is that relevant right now? Every time she says that, I retort in my mind. After all, we're an ordinary family, and it's not like we're a prestigious family needing a male heir. I have to deal with my cheating, mother-obsessed husband and my mother-in-law who loves both her son and bullying her daughter-in-law. In this daily life filled with problems about the two of them, my daughter's smile is my only hope. I have thought about divorce numerous times, but as I'm currently unemployed and a full-time housewife, I worry about financial stability. Thinking about my growing daughter, I don't want to make her life harder. More importantly, I couldn't bear to take away her beloved father, so I have been unable to make the decision to divorce. One day, my daughter showed me a portrait she drew of me at school. In the picture, I was holding her hand and smiling. She's gotten quite good at drawing, I noticed. I smiled, feeling proud of my daughter's progress. Because of her, I can still keep going, as I stroked her head, saying, "Thank you." She grinned shyly. Then, on another regular day, while I was doing housework after seeing my husband and daughter off to work and school, my mother-in-law called. She had something for me and wanted me to come over to her house immediately. The call was demanding that I come to my mother-in-law's house immediately because she needed something. "Why don't you get what you need as you usually do, Mom?" By this point, I had developed some resistance to my mother-in-law's unreasonable demands and could retort back if she threw a word or two my way.
Well, summoning an old woman like me, what a cold-hearted daughter-in-law you are.
As expected, my mother-in-law raised her voice very dramatically. I let out a sigh. Looking out the window, the outside was gloomy and dark. It looked like it was about to rain any moment. All right, I'll head over there in a bit." Saying that nonchalantly, I ended the call. I wasn't sure what she needed, but I could easily imagine that it was some minor chore, like always, a burnt-out light bulb, a bathtub that needed cleaning. I sped up the folding of the laundry, changed into something more comfortable, and headed over to my mother-in-law's place. Upon arrival, I was greeted by my mother-in-law.
Took you long enough.
However, she seemed unusually cheerful. Mom, do you have guests over?" I tilted my head as I saw a pair of leather shoes and pumps neatly arranged at the entrance.
Yes, there's someone I want you to meet.
I was puzzled even more, but as I followed my mother-in-law into the living room, I found my husband who was supposed to be at work and an unfamiliar woman. Moreover, the woman had a noticeably large belly.
Come on, have a seat.
Prompted by my mother-in-law, I sat down. I thought you were at work? Bypassing the woman for the moment, my husband scratched his cheek awkwardly as I addressed him.
I took a paid day off. I have something I need to talk to you about today, and I asked Mom for help.
Is it about this lady? As I glanced at her, the woman was peeling an orange with a calm expression and munching on it. In contrast, my husband paled, trembled, and bowed his head deeply.
I got her pregnant. She's due in 3 months, and she says she wants to keep the baby, so I want a divorce.
When I saw the woman's belly, I had more or less guessed.
I couldn't bring myself to tell you, and while I was procrastinating, her belly kept growing.
Seeing that, my husband pathetically apologized and asked for a divorce. I let out a big sigh. Who was that apology for? It was an apology to push through his own demands, not an apology to me. Knowing that, I couldn't hold back the sadness that welled up inside me. Were you not thinking about Wendy? How could you interact with Wendy while you were having an affair? This was something I had said to my husband when we were in a terrible state due to his previous affair. But I told you to think about Wendy, not me. If you ever feel like having an affair again, didn't I? My husband adored our daughter. That's why I cried and told him that his affair would not only hurt me, but also our beloved daughter, but it seems it didn't deter him at all. This isn't an affair, it's real love. A gentle voice interrupted the conversation between my husband and me. The woman he cheated with was looking at us with a calm smile. Reynolds always told me that he loved me more than his wife and daughter. That's why I could get pregnant with a boy that his mother desired as a symbol of our love. Saying that, she smiled, and while saying right, she stroked her belly. Her audacity was so outrageous that I was more flabbergasted than angry. I couldn't believe he dared to say something like that in this situation. Then, my silent mother-in-law decided to speak up.
Well, unlike you, Marcia is young, gentle, and kind-hearted. I completely support your divorce.
Turns out, the mistress's name was Marcia. I would think a kind-hearted young lady wouldn't go getting herself pregnant with a married man's child. I muttered this under my breath, and my mother-in-law glared at me in irritation.
Enough out of you. You're done here. You only give birth to girls, so just get divorced and leave quickly.
My mother-in-law, shooing me away with a wave of her hand, shouted at me. My husband wouldn't meet my eyes, and Marcia stroked her pregnant belly with a victorious grin. I understand about the divorce. I will take care of Wendy. I felt as if I was being driven out, and I ran out of my in-laws' house. As expected, it had started to rain outside. I had brought an umbrella when I came, but I had left it at the entrance of my in-laws' house. That was my favorite one too. But at this point, I didn't care about such things. I let out a dry laugh and began my walk home in the rain. The divorce proceeded uneventfully, and before I knew it, 3 months had passed. My ex-husband was reluctant to part with our daughter, but he seemed to understand the gravity of his actions, and in the end agreed to my demands for alimony and child support. He seems to have prepared the alimony by selling the condo we lived in. I was mentally and physically exhausted, but thanks to the lawyer my dad introduced me, the process was quicker than I had anticipated. My main concern was my daughter, but she continued to smile at me even after the divorce. I knew she was trying to put on a brave face for me. We were staying at my parents' house for now, and she was still going to the same school, but depending on where we would live and my job, we might have to consider switching schools. My daughter seemed to understand this, but I knew she felt differently inside. There is nothing more heartbreaking than seeing your child suffer because of a parent's selfish actions. I spent my days looking for a new home and a job within my daughter's school district, trying my best to keep her from feeling lonely. That's when I received a call from my ex-husband. I had left him my contact information in case of issues regarding child support. Depending on the matter, I was planning to hang up on him, but I answered the call. As soon as I picked up, he started panicking.
The color of our baby's eyes.
I was taken aback by the abruptness of his statement. We agreed you wouldn't contact me unless it's about child support or something necessary. I tried to reply calmly.
That's not the point. I've been deceived.
I could have ignored him and hung up, but I was curious about what he was talking about, so I decided to listen.
The baby that was born has black eyes and black hair too.
To make a long story short, Marcia had apparently given birth recently, but it seemed that the baby's lineage was definitely not American. By the way, it seemed that the baby was indeed a boy. I had heard that he had married Marcia immediately after our divorce, and I had to restrain myself from laughing.
Marcia was seeing multiple men besides me. One of them was apparently Japanese. I can't believe it.
My ex-husband was expressing his anger as if he were the victim. Continuing, he vented out his frustrations.
This is a scam. When I threatened to sue, they said they picked me because I seem to have the most money. Can you believe it? It's too much.
Neither my ex-husband, his mother, nor the woman who gave birth herself probably ever imagined it would come to this. But ultimately, it's karma. So I have no sympathy. What, you're saying this? At my worst, my ex-husband is clearly taken aback, and I can't help but smirk. Did this man think I was going to console him? Well, cheaters don't belong together, don't they? What does it matter if their eyes are black? It's undoubtedly the boy your dear mother wished for. At my words, my ex-husband is visibly shaken.
But I'm planning to break up with Marcia. I was hoping we could get back together.
I hold my head in my hands as my ex-husband stammers out a request for a remarriage.
Mom also thinks it would be a good idea.
At this unwarranted addition, my anger explodes. I hope you live happily with your wife, who is just like your dear mother and your cute black-haired, black-eyed baby. By the way, it seems you have forgotten, but if the baby was delivered safely, I'll be claiming damages for the affair from Marcia. Be prepared for that. I spit out those words, hang up the phone, and promptly switch off my mobile. I originally intended to wait until Marcia gave birth to demand damages out of consideration for the baby. This call let me know the baby has been born, so it's a good time. But at the same time, I feel a growing sense of danger at my ex-husband's suggestion for reconciliation. Until now, I have been looking for a place to live and work in this area to prevent my daughter from having to switch schools. But I'm starting to think it might be better to move to a place out of their reach. That evening, I was having dinner with Mom and my daughter. Dad hasn't come home from work yet. My daughter is excited to watch anime together when Grandpa comes home. Even Mom is looking forward to it, saying, maybe Grandma should join in too. Our peaceful moment is abruptly interrupted by the sudden ringing of the intercom. Wondering who it could be at this hour, I peek at the screen to see my ex-husband and his mother. Wendy, stay with Grandma for a bit. I leave my daughter with Mom and open the front door, leaving the chain on. There is a loud click as the door opens forcefully. I'm glad I left the chain on. Just as I think this, I hear a clicking sound and see my ex-husband's mother peeking in. Behind her, my ex-husband stands with a downcast face.
Ray's offering to take you back and you turned him down?
Ray is my ex-husband. His mother has been calling him that since he was a child, it seems.
You don't have a chance of getting remarried with a child. Don't you understand Ray's kindness?
Mind your own business. You have a new daughter-in-law who gave birth to your long-awaited grandson with black hair and black eyes. Get along with her. At my words, mother-in-law's face turned red.
If I knew she was that kind of woman, I would have put up with you.
Pushing mother-in-law aside, my ex-husband now reaches out from the gap in the door.
Emmeline, I truly regret what I did. I was deceived too. Let's build a happy family together this time.
At the front door, my ex-husband rattled the doorknob, crying, pleading, while my irate ex-mother-in-law shouted at him. I was at a loss as to what to do in this bizarre situation, but then an unexpected person managed to silence them both.
Dad, you guys always pick on Mom. I hate you.
When I turned around, my daughter was standing there with tears in her eyes. Mom, running up from behind her, was trying to keep her away from the door. In Mom's hand was her smartphone. Your father and our lawyer are on their way over. It turned out she had been in touch with my dad and the lawyer who had helped me during the divorce. Wendy must have taken advantage of the chaos to come over to my place. I felt a little relieved at Mom's words. I was honestly scared of the intense energy the two were exuding, almost as if they would break in any moment. "Wendy, why don't you wait over there with Grandma?" But Wendy stubbornly shook her head.
I'll protect Mommy. I hate Daddy and his friend,"
she declared, bursting into tears. I couldn't help but tear up at the sight and pulled her into my arms. My ex-mother-in-law and ex-husband just stood there dumbstruck. All of their prior aggression seemed to vanish, leaving their faces void of any life. Wendy's words had hit them hard. While all this was going on, Dad and the lawyer finally arrived, and to top it off, a police car showed up as well. It seems the neighbors had called the police.
"Reynolds, your daughter will never be with you again. If you truly regret what you have done, then you know what you should be doing, and it's not this."
I spoke up after Dad standing before my ex-husband and mother-in-law. "Please don't hurt Wendy anymore. I won't ever comply with your demands. I never want to be involved with you again." My words, followed by Dad's, seemed to hit them hard. They grimaced, nodded, and quietly got into the police car. The lawyer assured us,
"I'll take stricter measures to ensure this never happens again."
He would be dealing with the compensation for Marcia, my ex-husband's mistress, among other things. I deeply bowed my head in gratitude for his forthcoming assistance. I later heard that my ex-husband ended up divorcing Marcia and suing her. Marcia had apparently turned to the Japanese father of her baby for help. While he had accepted the baby, it turns out he already had a family and his wife forced Marcia to leave. Now, Marcia faces demands for compensation not only from me and my ex-husband, but also from the wife of her baby's father. I can't help but worry about her future and hope for the best for her child. My ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law are now the talk of the neighborhood, leading a miserable life together. My ex-husband has increased his overtime to pay the child support and remaining compensation, working like a horse but making sure to pay on time. As for me and Wendy, we have moved to a place where we have no connection with my ex-husband and his mother. Thanks to an old contact, I have found work again, and Wendy is enjoying her new school and making friends. I am determined to live a strong life. Looking forward to watching my daughter grow up.
I lost my mother to illness when I was in elementary school. My father was the one who worked hard to raise me. I loved my gentle father dearly. When I married my husband Ethan, my father shed tears and said, "Please, take good care of Lily." My only concern was Ethan's parents. Both my father-in-law and mother-in-law graduated from prestigious private universities. They were true elites. Father-in-law established his own company when he was young and literally made a fortune in one generation. However, not long after we married, the company went bankrupt. It was because mother-in-law, who was registered as an executive, spent too much of the company's money. My desperate in-laws suggested moving in together. "Clearly, we're going to have children, and we can't afford to support you," Ethan argued. Listening to my husband's words, I sighed with relief. Unless there was a need for caregiving, I wanted to avoid living with my in-laws. It seemed my husband felt the same. Then father-in-law yelled, "Are you repaying the kindness of raising you with ingratitude?" Mother-in-law began to cry. "This is what happens when you marry a woman from a poor family. You've become rotten to the core." My in-laws wanted to live together. We wanted to avoid it. The conversation got nowhere. "It's really impossible to live together, but maybe we can send some money." My husband said that, and I glared at him. But paying money meant we wouldn't have to live together. I chose the option that would lighten my mental burden, persuaded by my husband. However, this was the beginning of our troubles. The agreement was to provide $300 a month, but they kept asking for additional money every month, saying, "We can't pay for medical bills and medicine," or "My back hurts, so I need to go to a chiropractor." I had my doubts about whether this was true, but I didn't feel like going to check. If we refused, they might bring up living together again. I grappled with frustration, but endured the constant begging for money. Our finances were barely making ends meet every month. That's why I started working part-time at a bar, leaving my young son Noah at the childcare center. The bar paid well, and they would let me take home leftover food. Somehow, we managed to stabilize our finances. And when Noah turned 10, my husband was ordered to transfer by his company. Since the transfer was to a rural area, Noah and I considered moving with him. But my husband said, "It's better to be near your father," and thought of my father, who lived alone. My father's house was about 20 minutes away by train. The transfer location was at a distance that required the use of a bullet train. I decided to rely on my husband's words. While I was working at the bar, my father would take care of Noah. He seemed happy to spend time with his grandson. I would take home food from the bar, and my father, Noah, and I would gather around the dining table. Noah, who never warmed up to his paternal grandparents, was unreservedly affectionate with my father. My humble and grandson-loving father, on the other hand, was the complete opposite of my in-laws. They would brazenly claim to be my parents and eat and drink as they pleased at the bar where I worked, leaving without paying. I paid all their bills. They didn't come often, but they seemed to show off to friends or juniors when they did. Once or twice a month, it still hurt to pay for them from my part-time earnings. The manager often sent something and gave me substantial discounts, saying, "You're always working hard." I want to splash beer on them someday. How satisfying that would feel. I indulged in fantasies of defeating my in-laws. In the fall of Noah's junior year in high school, preparing for university entrance exams, I received a call from my husband. "I can come home in the spring." "Really?" "Yeah, and with a promotion to boot. I really put you through a lot. Let's live happily together again, the three of us." Next spring is looking busy. As soon as I hung up, the electronic sound of an incoming call rang out. Thinking it was my husband, I answered without looking. "What?" I inadvertently let out a careless, deflated voice. "Hello, this is the city hospital?" The caller explained the urgent matter in a tense voice. My father had collapsed and was taken to the hospital. He had stopped to buy Noah's favorite pudding at a convenience store and fainted in front of the cashier. I grabbed only my wallet and phone and rushed to the hospital. Although I couldn't get many details, I was told my father was in emergency surgery. "Dad!" I called out to him, praying, "Please make it. Please." When I arrived at the hospital, I gave the reception staff my father's name. "I heard he's in surgery now." I pressed the staff at the front desk, drenched in sweat. "Please head to the 4th floor." I was directed to the operating room. The surgery wasn't over yet, so I sat on the bench, praying and waiting. Several hours later, the doctor informed me the surgery was done. The diagnosis was a stroke. There would be a slight impairment in speech and motor functions, but I was nothing but grateful that his life was spared. Dad's condition gradually stabilized. During my free time, I visited the hospital, talking to Dad, even giving his immobile hand a massage. "Dad, today, Noah." I made sure to tell Dad all about Noah. His initial response was weak, but daily rehab was fruitful, and Dad started to show signs of recovery. One day, while massaging his hand as usual, Dad weakly grasped my hand. It was the first response since the surgery, and I was so happy that I cried. "Dad, you did great." Then, Dad slowly shook his head and pointed at me with the hand he could move. "Thank you," he stuttered, smiling. He should have had difficulty moving his facial muscles, yet he smiled at me. Stroke aside, Dad seemed to have aged, becoming smaller. I recalled him at the wedding. "Take good care of Lily," he had said, firmly shaking hands with my husband. Strong, dependable hands. Now they had become small, so it was my turn to protect Dad. I firmly grasped my thin father's hand, encouraging myself. I had to leave the hospital before evening as I had a part-time job at the bar. I hope Dad continues to recover. I started my job full of hope. My in-laws were the first to enter when the shop opened. "Lily dear," they called cheerfully. They brought along 2 men, a bit older than themselves. I didn't care how they were related, and didn't care to know, so I led them to their seats, following the restaurant's protocol. "As soon as you sit, order as much as you like," said father-in-law. "Don't worry about the bill," added mother-in-law, as if they won't just push it onto me again. I focused on serving them, hiding my annoyance. I'd just had good news about Dad, after all. The peaceful events at the hospital were ruined by the in-laws in front of me. Sure enough, they knew no bounds. They ordered beer, soju, sake, one after another. The table was a mess, with spilled drinks and food scraps. The 2 men they brought seemed drunk and started harassing me. "Hey, wife, bring the beer, quickly!" What a shame. Our daughter-in-law here. Really, such an incapable wife. The in-laws began to loudly criticize me on purpose. I tried to hold back since I was at work, but my heart couldn't contain it. "Excuse me, customers! There are others here. Can you please quiet down a bit?" I attempt a desperate counterattack. I hoped that by speaking loud enough for other customers to hear, it would embarrass my in-laws. "It's just a party. Who cares?" That's what they mean by "you can tell where someone's from." "Look, your plate's open, ma'am." Fueled by alcohol, their remarks escalated. "It seems she was raised so carelessly because she has no mother." I was so entangled by my mother-in-law's words that I couldn't respond. I was already holding back at the edge of my limits from having my daughter Noah insulted, but now they're even mentioning my late mother. I've always wanted to splash beer on them. Imagining defeating my in-laws like this had become part of my daily routine. That day, I was virtually pouring a bottle of flat beer over their heads. In my imagination, of course. And in January, Noah was accepted into his first choice private university. On the day of the acceptance announcement, my husband also called and brought the happy news that he could come home the day before Noah's graduation ceremony. We would both be attending Noah's graduation. The night of the graduation, we had planned to celebrate Noah's success and my husband's promotion at the bar where I worked. But that meant we couldn't avoid inviting my in-laws. My father was still in the hospital, so he couldn't come, but ignoring my in-laws would cause problems later. I prayed that they would be busy, but if they knew we were treating them, they would definitely come. They were 2 such despicable people. When I called to invite them, sure enough, both agreed to come. Noah's new private university is known nationwide as a prestigious institution, and my father-in-law pompously said, "He inherited my genes." Well, see you on that day. I quickly ended the call. The night of Noah's graduation, I happily walked to the restaurant with my husband and Noah, the 3 of us together, after a long time. The in-laws had already arrived by taxi, I was informed. The restaurant manager had kindly prepared a private room for our celebration. Just thinking about my in-laws made my stomach ache. Still, I decided to smile as much as possible in front of the family and entered the restaurant. We took our seats and toasted with bottled beer for the adults, juice for Noah. "Noah, congratulations!" My husband smiled warmly at him. "Congratulations on your promotion," I said to my husband, raising my glass. "I'm really looking forward to college in the spring," Noah exclaimed. "Here, this is from Grandpa." I handed Noah a cherry-colored envelope. Grandpa here refers to my father, of course. From Grandpa? Noah joyfully accepted the envelope. It's not much, but he said to enjoy college life. Grandpa prepared this celebration gift with a nurse's help, even though his hands still aren't moving properly, I explained. Just knowing my father's feelings was enough. I had reported to my in-laws over the phone that my father had a stroke and was hospitalized. They were out playing and only responded, "Oh, really?" Watching them, it suddenly hit me. "Speaking of which, it's really tough, huh? A stroke," he said nonchalantly. I was used to it by now, so I brushed it off. Yes, it is. But the progress is good. My father-in-law didn't seem to like my indifferent attitude and mocked my collapsed father. "It's a brain disease, right? His head's gone crazy, hasn't it?" Noah's brow furrowed as he looked at father-in-law. Quick to counter, my husband spoke up. "Is that any way to talk?" "But it's the truth, isn't it?" "Yes, it's a brain disease, right?" The in-laws were not at all shaken by their son's argument. The boastful in-laws couldn't help but enjoy the misfortune of others. "Just stop it," my husband began to say, but I held up my hand to his face. Then I splashed the lukewarm beer that was left in the glass right onto father-in-law. The flat beer left in the bottle was poured over my mother-in-law. I could endure them speaking ill of me. If it doesn't reach Noah's ears, I can bear it, but I couldn't stand to hear them say that my father, who had raised me with all his might, was crazy. My father's hand had become so small. It was up to me to protect that hand. I glared at my in-laws. "Don't mock my father." The in-laws were at a loss for words, having beer suddenly thrown on them. "It was just a joke! Come on!" Father-in-law retorted in a low voice. My husband then countered, "Dad? Mom?" They slowly looked up at their son's voice. "There's a reason why I invited you here today." My husband pulled out a single note from his wallet. He placed it where the in-laws could see, like a slap in the face. On it was a detailed list of the in-laws' extravagant spending. A bus tour with friends, luxury spa treatments, purchasing designer bags, and much more. "You can find out about this stuff easily," he said. The in-laws no longer tried to make eye contact. Everything my husband had found seemed to be true. "If you can afford to live so luxuriously, you don't need our support anymore," I quickly followed up. "No, that, well..." Cutting off father's indecisive words, I said, "You don't need it, right?" "But just the allowance," mother-in-law pleaded. "No, we won't send any more money. We're cutting ties too," my husband stated firmly. "Please go home." My disheveled and soaked in-laws looked at me with stunned expressions. "Please leave." I pointed to the exit and said it once again. Under the pressure of my firm stance, my in-laws slithered out as if crawling on the floor. It seemed my husband knew everything. He knew the torment I was going through. Apparently, Noah would sometimes stop by the bar to say thanks for the meals. But, embarrassed to be seen by me, he waited until I wasn't there. At that time, the manager had been reporting to Noah how I was being treated by my in-laws. "It's hard to tell a child this, but please protect your mom," he was told. Noah had discussed this with my husband. My husband had declared that when he returned, he would sever ties and stop all financial support. However, he had asserted that it would only be carried out once he was back, since he couldn't protect Noah or me when he was away. And so, my husband stopped the payments as promised. Every day, my in-laws called, probably to demand the money. Before cutting ties completely, I unleashed everything I wanted to say to my in-laws. There's nothing to fear, since I'm ending this relationship. After ending the call unilaterally, I blocked my in-laws' contact. A few days later, my in-laws seemed to have asked my part-time job's manager to help them get in touch with me. They did this multiple times during business hours. The manager, annoyed, lost his temper. "Don't ever come back to our store," he yelled, throwing an empty beer bottle and chasing them out. In the conversation between my in-laws at that time, I heard words like payments and monthly installments. So it seems they are likely taking cash advances or making installment payments, unable to lower their standard of living. Serves them right. I'm now working at the second bar, opened by the manager, He made arrangements to ensure that my in-laws couldn't harm me if they came to the store. My father will be discharged from the hospital soon, and it's decided that we'll live together in this house. My husband and Noah both fully agreed. As I cleaned the room that will be dedicated to my father, I thought back to his small hands.